I want to talk today about Nicholas Copernicus. Nicholas Copernicus lived around 500 years ago, and the reason that he is so important in the development of physics is that he presented a theory about the sun being at the centre of the universe. Not all of his theory was correct, but from Aristotle's time, it was held that the Earth was actually at the centre of the universe and that all things revolved around the Earth. Copernicus presented a model in which the centre of the solar system, and which was the known universe as far as the ancient people were concerned, that the centre of the universe was in fact the sun. This, of course, flew in the face of not only what Aristotle had said, but it also flew in the face of what the Church had said, because the Church had adopted Aristotle's theories as part of their own teachings, because they could see that what Aristotle had said about the Earth being stationary at the centre of the universe accorded with what was written in the Bible about the Earth being stationary and the sun moving. Copernicus didn't publish his findings for a long time for two reasons. One is that he wasn't certain about this theory that the sun was at the centre of the solar system, and secondly, he was worried about being ostracised by others in society who might disagree with him. Whether he was afraid of the impact that this book could have with the Church is unclear. His friends persuaded him to publish his book, and it was published, so the story goes, with a first copy reaching him on the very day that he died. The book was on the revolutions of the celestial spheres, and it set out his idea that the sun was at the centre of the then known universe. Copernicus didn't fully get the whole picture, though. He still retained some of the old notions of the sun and other celestial bodies being perfect spheres and so on, and retained some of the more complex elements of the past theories. But the idea that the sun was at the centre certainly was central to what he was teaching. In fact, Copernicus was not the first person to have this idea about the sun being the centre of the solar system. This idea was first proposed by Aristarchus of Samos, a Greek astronomer and mathematician who lived between 310 and 230 BCE. And we know about this not because of Aristarchus's writings, none of which remain, but because reference was made to it by Archimedes in his book, The Sand Reckoner, and he referred to the fact that Aristarchus had developed this theory that it was indeed the sun that was the centre of the universe at that time. Even though this theory came 1,700 years before Copernicus put his theory forward, it's Copernicus who gets the credit for it, because Aristarchus didn't really develop the theory in any systematic way, whereas Copernicus did make some attempts to put the theory together in a more consistent manner. The odd thing is that despite the fact that Copernicus published his theory and that it contradicted comments made in the Christian Bible, it was not until 60 years after the publication of Copernicus's book that it actually caused some trouble with the Church, and that later on, in fact, was connected with what happened to Galileo, who, when he started to do some work with his new telescopes, he was able to give support to Copernican theory about the sun being at the centre of the universe, and therefore it was a much greater threat to the Church, whereas Copernicus really didn't have any solid evidence for making this claim, and so he wasn't believed by many people, and it was the Church perhaps felt it was his writings were a little bit less of a threat. Copernicus also wrote in Latin so that his writings were not available to the general population, whereas Galileo wrote in Italian some years later, and so what he wrote was available to the ordinary person in the street. Copernicus also made mention of something that became very, very important for the development of physics. He talked about the relativity of motion. Copernicus challenged the idea that Aristotle had, that the natural state of matter was a stationary one, and that the Earth was therefore stationary because it was in its natural state. Copernicus wrote this sentence. He said, "As a matter of fact, when a ship floats over a tranquil sea, all the things outside seem to the voyagers to be moving in a movement which is a mirror of their own. And they think, on the contrary, that they themselves and all the things with them on the ship are at rest, and it's the things outside that are in fact moving." You might have experienced this if you've been sitting in a train at a train station and another train is beside the train that you are on, and then one of those trains starts to move, perhaps the other one starts to move slowly away, and you think you are moving, or the other way around. It's a quite common experience for people who are on trains in stations and they see one train move with respect to another. This wasn't Copernicus's main point, however. It was just part of his argument that the Earth was not necessarily stationary, but rather the Sun was stationary and the Earth was moving compared to the Sun. So it's not a theory that was developed. The idea here is that if we have somebody in a train, for example, and the train is moving, let's say, with a velocity of 12 meters per second to the right, and there's an observer on the ground watching this train, then as far as the observer on the ground is concerned, the train looks like it's moving 10 meters per second to the right. However, if you consider this situation from the point of view of the person who's in the train, they could equally regard themselves as not moving anywhere. And in fact, if it's a very smooth train ride, they may not see themselves moving, feel themselves to be moving anywhere either, much as we don't generally feel ourselves to be moving in a plane when we travel. Apart from air turbulence, we can't tell that we're moving at close to 1,000 kilometers an hour when we sit on a plane. So to the person in the train, it feels like to them that their velocity is in fact zero, that their speed is zero. But when they look at the things outside seem to be zipping past them in the opposite direction to the way that the train is actually moving, so that the person on the ground appears to be moving past them at a speed of 10 meters per second to the left. This is what Copernicus was referring to when he was saying that to a person on the ship, it's the people outside who appear to be moving in a mirror image to the way that the ship is moving. Now, if we take this argument one step further and we look at what would be the motion of a ball thrown by a passenger on this train, then to the person who's standing on the ground, the calculation is fairly simple. They see the ball moving. When it's in the passenger's hand, they would see the ball moving at a speed of 10 meters per second. While the passenger is holding the ball, before they throw it, they would see the ball moving at a speed of the same as the train, 10 meters per second to the right. Once the passenger throws the ball, and the ball is thrown at a speed of 5 meters per second relative to this passenger, then the person on the ground doesn't see the ball moving at 5 meters per second at all. They see this ball initially moving with a speed of 10 meters per second, and now to that, they must add the 5 meters per second that the passenger throws the ball at. So they decide a total of that the ball is moving with 15 meters per second compared to the person standing on the ground. For the person inside the train, the story is somewhat different. The passenger inside the train, initially the ball is not moving at all. When the ball is in the passenger's hand, its velocity is zero compared to the person holding it. The ball's not going anywhere. When the passenger throws the ball, it's now got a velocity of 5 meters per second to the right. So to the passenger on the train, the ball is moving at 5 meters per second. To the person on the ground, the ball is moving at 15 meters per second. So you can see it matters very much how we look at this situation, where the person is standing, who's making the observations. That the Church objected to these notions of relative motion was due to the fact that the Bible states in certain places that the sun was made to stand still, which implies it was the sun and not the earth which was moving. This fitted neatly with what Aristotle had said, which was one of the reasons that the Church had adopted Aristotle's theories in the first place, and was the reason that Copernicus was reluctant to publish what he knew about the solar system, or what he believed to be the case. To sum up, Copernicus believed that the sun was at the centre of what was then the known universe of the planets that they could observe. He also held that motion was relative. It was equally correct from the point of view of science to consider the observer on the train as moving, or the person standing on the ground moving in the opposite direction. This becomes very significant in later developments of physics and is a foundation, in fact, for relativity theory. But as I said before, it was not Copernicus's main point. Copernicus was arguing that the sun was at the centre of the universe, and it had to wait for Galileo to come and put these views forward more clearly. Copernicus argued in favour of the idea that motion was relative because it was part of the argument that the sun, not the earth, was at the centre of the universe. As I said, it wasn't his main point in his arguments. Galileo disagreed with Aristotle on this very profound idea, and it was Galileo that we have to thank for the foundations of modern physics and the scientific method.